welcome back. I've got Dr. Kimberly Harms on the line. Kimberly, how are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to this conversation. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump into this very important conversation.
Well, I've been around the block a lot in life. I've been a commissioned officer in the United States Public Health Service. I'm a dentist, was a first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association, and I was a national spokesperson for the American Dental Association. But I'm on the other side of that now. I had an injury in my hand, and so I'm not practicing anymore. So I turned to speaking. So I've been an international speaker. I've written a couple books. And now that I'm in the fourth quarter of my life and can look back, I've written a book called Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, because I want to focus on this part of my life and what's my purpose now.
It's important work, and it's a subject that I find a lot of people are uncomfortable to approach. And, from a personal standpoint, my mother passed away earlier this year, and she did a pretty good job in setting things up as far as the after passing, with, where things are, how to do things and all of that. The will was clearly laid out. Everything was nice and seamless and as easy as it could be from that aspect of it. Losing a loved one is never easy. And but it's one of those things where it was a reminder for my brother and myself to say, okay, let's pay that forward by doing the same thing, by getting everything kind of established, clear cut, and all of that. So when our time comes, when it's the end of the fourth quarter for us, then our surviving families and friends will have clear instructions how to do things and have it set up in such a way where they don't have to worry about that. They just, can focus on the grieving and the mourning and all of that. So if anybody takes anything away from what I'm saying, go get your will or your trust set up, get everything laid out. I know it's not a fun topic, but it's going to happen. And the it's a gift that you're giving to not only yourself but loved ones, because it's peace of mind for yourself, knowing, okay, I don't have to worry about any of that. When I go, then I don't have to, worry about that before that transfer, before I, expire basically. So important work for sure. So, and I know in your story, in your bio, you've, had to face, some significant losses over your life. And I they teach us lessons, at least from my perspective. And once you, learn how to grieve, and again, that's even another subject. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, don't really know how to grieve. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I lost my mother to suicide when I was 17. And then I lost our son, who was this brilliant student at Columbia University, came home first semester on top of the world. He had been named to the dean's list in engineering. He was in the place. He'd been elected to student government. He was just on top of the world, so happy. And 2 weeks after his second semester started, he took his own life 45 minutes after a breakup with a girlfriend. So a failure. He wasn't used to failure, I think, and he had a young brain. He was also a jazz pianist, which is why he loved Columbia, because he could study engineering and play jazz piano. And our world was just torn apart. It just exploded. And I learned a very important lesson then. And that was about a couple of weeks after coming out of my dental office. My husband was out there at practice with my husband, and he was talking with a cousin and very seriously. And then the cousin came over to me, and he was angry. I'm a grieving mother. I wasn't used to angry people coming at me. He was angry, and he was shaking his finger in my face. And I was taken aback, and he said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough. Don't you do that to them." And it caught me by surprise, because I realized that he had lost his brother at the same age that we had lost our son. And he felt that he lost his parents at the same time. He felt that the parents could no longer uh, pay attention to their living children because they were so consumed with grief over the dead one. And I was headed in the same direction. It was such a, I didn't think I'd ever get out of that pit, and so it forced me with that confrontation to realize that my grief affects everyone around me, especially my family. And it was at that moment that I just decided to fight and kick and scream and crawl my way out of that pit to find happiness in life again. And I could breathe the fresh air now. I live my life full of joy at this point. took time. It was not easy. It took years to get out. Never was easy, but it's certainly worth it. And that's what I'd like to send to your leaders and your listeners, that your grief as a leader even affects everybody around you. And it's so much better for you and for everybody else to fight tooth and nail to get out of that grief pit, because it takes a fight. If you don't fight, you're just going to stay down there. So don't give up. Keep fighting.
Yeah, it's an important lesson too, because leaders lead, and those that are being led by the leader, we're looking to you as the leader. We're looking to you for guidance and to tell us everything's going to be okay, and protect us. There's, so many different things that are on the plate of a leader, and some are better than others in certain aspects of it. No one is by far perfect, but there are some that, even when they're going through a personal challenge, such as the loss of a loved one, or end of a marriage, or you name it, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm not ignoring that, but my people need me to be the best version of me. And how do I do that? And again, it's not easy. This isn't for the weak. But the listeners of this show, you're not weak. You know that. You're strong, you're resilient, you're able to accomplish a lot, and you're going to accomplish even more. But there's going to be days that are going to be tough, and sometimes weeks, sometimes months, depending on what's going on in your world. But know that there is another side of this. But yeah, you're going to have to fight through it and get through it. And that confrontation was a blessing to you, quite frankly, from my observation, because I've seen people that have lost loved ones, and they never recovered. I think about my grandmother, when her youngest son died in an auto accident, and he was well into his 40s when this happened, and it spiraled grandma to the point where she didn't recover from that, and then she developed Lewy body dementia, and that was a 7-year fight, and very tragic to view and experience all that gave us. But I often wonder if the situation with my uncle passing away, if that did not happen, what would have transpired? Would she have had that? Because our bodies and grief and our thoughts impact, how our body reacts. Our body is like, okay, well, you're dealing with stress, so I have to do all these other things. And having worked in healthcare before, and this obviously in your practice as well, that our brains and our thoughts can manifest diseases, illnesses, gum disease, you name it. I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of other factors, but it's our brains are very powerful, and they can be very helpful to us. But if we don't feed it the right things, they can be also very detrimental to us as well.
Well, that was a perfect example in my case, because I got treated for depression after my son died. It was part of my fighting out of the pit. And, of course, I have a mother and a son who took their own lives. I better get treated. Depression's in my family. But my husband, and I used to call him my stubborn Norwegian, he was a Norwegian farmer, and we were married for 44 years. But he did not get help because, he's a tough guy. He's not going to get help. And he had just had a liver transplant 6 months before my son died. And his heart checked out great before the transplant, because they don't give you a liver if your heart's bad, right? And about a year or so after Eric died, he ended up having quadruple bypass surgery and a valve replaced. And then basically after a long struggle with this broken heart, passed away 4 years ago. And I really believe that the grief, the untreated grief, the unrecognized grief, this idea that you can just be tough and get through it without help because you need help to fight your way out of that pit. I really believe that hastened his death. I believe that we might have had him, we're all going to die at some point in time, but I believe I might have had him a couple more years, because he was only 70 when he passed, and we miss him.
Yeah, that's early. Based on longevity of people, it's 70 is still very young. And as discoveries in science and things like that, we're all living much longer, which, is great to, contribute to society and things about that. Because, both my parents are gone and they were in their mid 70s when they left. And it's like, it just seems like it was too short. But I think, to tie this into a leadership a little bit more, grief is one of those things that impact leaders as well. Where let's say they have a bad work experience, maybe they had a difficult departure from an organization, and they go on to another organization, start working. But if they haven't worked through and processed what transpired, then I find that it diminishes their leadership, it diminishes their clarity, it diminishes their ability to be the best version of themselves as a leader. And it's one of those things, talking, about your late husband as well. And I was, also diagnosed with clinical depression. I
Mm.
sought help on that, worked through it, was on some medications. I'm not on them anymore. And for me, it was important because I thankfully recognized that I wasn't me and I didn't like that. And I wanted to be me again. And so I needed to do the work, not just, taking medication and thinking, okay, magic pill, make the pain go away. No, it's like that's not how it works, people. I mean, short term, okay, but you have to work on some things. And again, it's not easy, but is it worth it? Oh my goodness, yes, it definitely is. So, your thoughts on leadership and dealing with unaddressed grief and the impact that has on themselves and organizations. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I really think we need to lead through grief. And I think one of the best things you can do to develop a team that's tight and together, today everybody's having struggling getting employees in, just because of the market. And one of the things that keeps a team, a work team together is that common bond of respect. And when you're grieving, I would speak all over to dental organizations about this, but when you're grieving in the dental office, I recommended that we have a little huddle in the morning, usually where everyone just looks forward to the day and just admit, okay, Mary just lost her mother. She's a little on the edge right today, so let's watch out for her. Let's cover for her if something happens. We used to have signals if there was a problem. When my son died and we were trying to come back to work, we kind of had I call it a crying room upstairs where if I get triggered, because you're going back to work, you just lost your son, everybody knows who he was. They all loved him. They all would want to say something when they came in. So 30 times a day or so, I get, the so sorry for your loss. And which is great. I mean, that's what you should be doing. But sometimes it was overwhelming. And I had like a little signal to my dental assistant and to the others where I could just excuse myself from the room for a second and go up into the crying room where we had Visine and then, tissue and kind of get myself makeup remover, get myself put back together and then come down and someone was covering for me. So when you lead through grief and you've got like somebody's down, someone's on the injured list because they're grieving right now, let's surround them and help them get through their day. What the result is as a team that is bonding, a team, and the greatest predictor of happiness are strong personal relationships, right? So you've developed these strong relationships with your team and make your workplace a happier place. So I think one of the things you can do is when a grief situation occurs, lead through that, address it, bring your team together. And I think that the benefits are long lasting.
I love that approach to the team huddle. I worked in healthcare and we had huddles in the morning, but they were geared for, okay, who's the patients coming in today? Is there anything out of the ordinary? Or, okay, we have, Mrs. Smith is bringing in their son and he's autistic, and Nurse Jackie is the one nurse that he likes to work with. So we're going to shift Jackie's schedule. So when Mrs. Smith brings in her son, Jackie will be there to help, comfort the son, to mitigate any potential issues that may arise with dealing with somebody that is neurodivergent. But those were things that we did. I love your approach on, okay, yeah, we prep everything up. Okay, Mrs. Jones is coming in. She's afraid of needles, and all, and she doesn't like the drilling stuff. So maybe put some headphones on, whatever may help that patient navigate through the dental scaries. Don't be afraid of the dentist, people, by the way, just a side note, but I get why people have fear on it, but I've used dentists all my life. I'm not afraid of them. My mom actually worked for a dentist
There you
before I was
go.
born, so I'm kind of in the DNA. But I love your approach because, yeah, okay, this is who's coming in today, but it's also how is everybody doing?
Mm.
And if you have a tight group, and you can do this with large teams, and of course, small teams, you really should do it. What that does is it allows for, okay, Janice just got back from a trip and she's got a little bit of jet lag. We know that she's not going to be 100% today, but she's here. Okay, just help her out, check in, see, and you need any help on this? No, I got it. Knowing that you have backup
Yes.
is it actually helps you overcome some of those hurdles. Like, okay, I'm not feeling great, but you know what? My team, loves me and has my back and can step in if I need the help. It gives you that little extra 10% as a person to go, nope, I don't need it, but I am so thankful that you offered it. I appreciate that because there may be a time where you do need it. You need that crying room or comfort or someone to pinch hit for you when, something comes up or your child's sick at school. Okay, I'll come in and help out with that. When you have that dynamic, you don't have to worry about retention of people. Your challenge is, turning down all the resumes because people want to work in that, because people long for belonging. People long to be in organizations like that. And when you have that, it's something that it takes work to keep it that way. But it's such important work to do because it just improves every aspect of what that organization does. It doesn't matter if it's a dentist office or a retail store or an accounting firm or whatnot.
Right. And again, it's those relationships, building relationships, and you need to lead that. I mean, it's you give permission as a leader to develop that type of a system where everyone has their backs, and then just acknowledging that, there's an issue that's going to affect the team because they do, and then that helps the person overcome their grief. It helps they feel they have people have their back, and that helps them. It gives them that courage to kind of move their way out of the pit eventually.
So where do you, this is not the where do you see things in 5 years question, because 5 years ago we didn't know what was going to hit us. But I'm curious as to, what are some of the common challenges you're seeing right now in the workplace that leaders should really do their best to get ahead of and work through? And I know we've talked about a bunch, but is there any others that come to mind for you?
Well, I think the most important one is to make your team feel valued, to give them opportunities to work through grief, and building trust. Absolutely, you have to build trust. If you lose trust with your employees, you're going to lose your employees. And I think that working on the emotional issues, I'm as dentists, we typically are not we're very clinical people. We like we work in millimeters. We aren't typically as a group people that focus on emotions. And what for any organization, when you work and you handle the emotional issues and take care of any emotional emergencies, and when you see people in your office that maybe aren't getting along, kind of intervene there and help them get along. And when you do that, what you find is by developing an emotionally safe place where people feel valued, people feel protected, you increase loyalty of the customers because they feel it. They want to come. If people are afraid to go to the dentist, but they loved our office because they'd come in and people were laughing and joking and helping each other out. You build loyalty of your customers. You build retention for your team members, and ultimately you build production, because if you're everyone's working together for the same goal and you're all on the same page and you care about each other and you're working together, you increase production. So it's a win-win-win-win-win situation to manage those emotional emergencies well, to take care of conflict, and to build trust.
Yeah, trust is one of those things that can take years to build and seconds to lose. Uh, and again, everyone, leaders to the front lines, everyone's a leader wherever they happen to be. But it's one of those things where when you present yourself at work, and I see this a lot, I think a lot of people struggle with their own internal battles, their mindset, their egos, you name it. There's so many different things that get in the way of us living our best lives. But we have to remember that we are a collective. When we go into work, we're part of an organization that's doing great things, whatever you happen to be doing. And if you present in, it doesn't mean you have to show up 100% every day. It reminds me of an old joke that I saw a long time ago. It's like, I give 100% at work, 12% on Mondays, 10% on Tuesdays, and it's like, that's not what I mean, but I still, I should have I'm sure I could find that. I could print that out or create one myself, but that's not what it means. There's going to be days you're not going to be 100%. We know that. We're just, that's how it's going to be, but give your best that you can at that moment and be there for people. And again, in the environment you mentioned, and with the huddles and all of that, when you're not feeling it, let your people know. And I think that, quite frankly, it shows a little bit of courage and bravery on the individual, but it also shows that the organization is providing a psychologically safe environment for people to say, you know what, I'm just out of it today. And I apologize in advance. And then you just say, okay, what can I do to help? And then those people know, okay, I'm having a bad day, but tomorrow's going to be better. And knowing that you don't have the Sunday scaries, as people call it, or you don't have the oh, I don't want to go to work kind of thing. Okay, yeah, none of us do. Okay, and some days we just don't want to work, but other days we're like, I cannot wait for tomorrow because I love working where I work. I love these people. Can't wait to see them. I'm excited to share what I experienced when I went to whatever event on the weekend. It's like there's going to be so many people that are going to love to do this. Everyone's going to do it. You're chomping at the bit to share it because that's going to bring them joy and happiness. And when we get to do that in an environment, it doesn't become work anymore. It becomes playtime for all of us. And it's those environments are around, they exist, and it's important for all of us to do whatever we can to contribute to those.
Absolutely. And again, the most important thing you can do to make that workplace a happy one is to give everyone that feeling that you are a team, you have their back, you're working together, you care about them.
Yeah, if you do that, the magic really happens. So, Kimberly,
Mhm.
I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Well, my book is called Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For. And you can find more information on my website, drkimberlyharms.com.
And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, thank you, Doctor, for your time today. Really appreciate you and I love the work you're doing. And I've loved our conversation today.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.